Calisthenics is the art of training with your own body weight. So in this video, I'm going to be ranking all the calisthenic back exercises and just try to see whether it's effective or ineffective. Alright, so this is gonna be like a new video style that I'm approaching in terms of the video topic, and I have a good feeling that you're gonna enjoy it. But before we dive too deep, let's take a minute to appreciate this hoodie, man. Like, I'm not gonna cap. I got this sent out from my childhood friend, and he put me on straight gang with this hoodie. He gave me 3 different colors. I'm currently rocking the black hoodie. Even got this little like warm fuzzy material on the inside to keep you cozy for the winter weather. So hey, definitely check it out. I'll put the link in the description, probably put the discount code on the screen. And I appreciate y'all show love to him the same way y'all show love to me. But enough of that. Now, I was inspired to create this calisthenic back exercise ranking primarily because I began a lot of people telling me like, yo, Cobra, what do you do to get a wide and thick back? Which exercise should I focus on building my back, right? These are all questions that I get across my YouTube platform, Instagram, even my TikTok. And I decided, like, why not go ahead and just think of all the most common back exercises that I've done personally and also what I've seen within the calisthenic community and kind of just like rank them, because I know y'all might have seen bodybuilders do this to a similar style. So I was like, let me go ahead and do this for the calisthenics community. You get me? So the whole premise of this is going to be to identify what's the most effective and ineffective exercises for the back in terms of building muscle. So keyword, building muscle, all right? Because what we want to do is get as jacked as possible within the most reasonable amount of time. That said, here are 3 things you need to consider when it comes to the most effective approach of building muscle. Number 1, can we train the back close to or till failure? Number 2, what is the exercise setup? Number 3, how effectively can we implement progressive overload? So throughout this video, let's just keep these questions in mind so it can kind of help you understand my reasoning and my judgment behind why I rank one exercise over another. And yeah, so let's start out with the first category, the vertical pulling exercises. These are movements that will play a major role in growing your lats to give you that width in your back by pulling your elbows down vertically in relation to your torso. Coming up first is going to be the muscle up. Now, this is an infamous movement that everyone knows about. I'd even say it's probably one of the most first movements people want to learn when starting calisthenics. At least for me, that is. So the muscle up will mainly target the lats and teres major in relation to our back muscles, but it does also involve other muscle groups such as the biceps, shoulders, triceps, and the chest. This is particularly when pressing up from the bar to get into that straight bar dip position. Now, considering the fact that it doesn't really necessarily directly and isolate the back, and it is a high strength or a technique based movement, I'm not gonna cap, man. I'm gonna have to put the muscle up as the low tier when it comes to building muscle for the back. Now, before you start raging in the comments talking about, oh no, why are you putting the muscle up as low tier? Look, listen, all right. We need to understand that if we want to build muscle as efficiently and effectively as possible, doing exercises that involves multiple muscle groups, more specifically, multiple movement patterns, which in this case is like the vertical pull and the horizontal push. So you're pulling up to the bar or a little bit over the bar, and then you're pushing away from the bar to get into that straight bar dip position. The likelihood of us hitting our back, right, and training it close to or till failure is going to be a lot lower, meaning that there's going to be like a greater chance of us exhausting other muscle groups because of the fact that we're just training like top of my head, chest, triceps, shoulders, back, right? It's already 4 muscle groups right there. That's gonna not allow us to train our back close to or till failure. So that's immediately one red flag that's essential for hypertrophy. And the second red flag is that it's a high skill technique, meaning you gotta have the technique down to even perform this movement effectively, right? So just because of that, it's a high technique demanding movement. We're not even going to be able to train this exercise to even close to a failure. Let's say if we're involving other muscle groups and then we're getting the technique incorrectly, so we're not necessarily training the muscle group the best that we can. So it's like you have to have the technique on point. Otherwise, you're not going to be stimulating those specific muscle groups from the muscle up, right? So those are 2 major red flags. And I believe because of that, I'm putting this at the low tier, and that's pretty much it, man. Besides, when it comes to just building muscle in my back, I actually never specifically trained for the muscle ups for that purpose. It was more so like a test of strength. So I definitely don't attribute my back gains, my width gains to the muscle up, right? So going on to our next exercise is going to be the scapular pull-ups. Now I know we're definitely scaling this exercise all the way down because this exercise is not the hardest, but it is definitely the most effective movement to learn, especially in the beginning stages of your calisthenics career. And I even say, like, for my own personal development, I still do the scapular pull-ups to this day, right? As an advanced calisthenic athlete doing well over 100 pounds, more specifically like 145 pounds on the way to chin up, 135 pounds on the way to pull up. And this is for multiple repetitions, not even a 1 rep max. If I had to choose a 1 rep max, I'm probably doing close to like 170, 180 for sure, easy, right? Okay, maybe not easy, but I for sure got it down the bag. So maybe I had to test that out, but that's a whole other video. Let me stop rambling. So yeah, scapular pull-ups, right? So the scapular pull-ups is a great way to help strengthen your scapular retraction, which is a very important activator for executing a lot of your pulling movements and skills, such as the front lever, inverted row, or just the basic pull-up. That said, I'm going to put this exercise at the mid-tier level. Now, this movement isn't going to develop an amazing back, but it's definitely going to set the foundation for the rest of your pulling strength for more advanced progressions, which leads on to my next exercise, the band assisted pull-ups. Now, this exercise right here is one of the best ways, if not the best way, to increase your strength for learning to pull up. And if you don't already know, the bands are used to help reduce the intensity of any particular exercise that you're performing. And I still use them to this day. Not specifically for the basic pull-ups, maybe for progressing onto the one-arm pull-up, learning my skills like the planche or front lever. But it goes to show that the bands are a crucial element to help bridge that gap between, you being a beginner to learning those more advanced movements, right? Especially if you don't have the strength to do them. So in terms of the lower barrier to entry, in terms of utilizing the bands for the band and pull-ups, and the high return ratio of utilizing the band assisted pull-ups into your workout routine, man, you're gonna get a lot of just potential strength and also a lot of great benefits to unlocking other exercises, right? Like simply the pull-ups, the muscle up even. So because of this, I'm gonna rank this exercise as upper tier. All right. Now, Cobra, why are we putting this exercise as upper tier? Isn't the band assisted pull-up just too easy compared to the pull-up, for example, right? You might be thinking that to yourself. Well, while I was making this video, I kind of took a step back and I was like, all right, in the eyes of a beginner, a novice, or even like I said, an advanced person, you can still use the bands for a multiple amount of like scenarios, right? If you want to learn a one-arm pull-up, if you want to learn skills, and of course, if you're a beginner, you want to learn the pull-up. And if you don't do the pull-ups, then you're gonna be shooting yourself in the foot. And I kind of gave it away, but the pull-ups is necessary. So doing the banded pull-ups when you don't have the strength is like super key. So that's why I'm putting it as upper tier, but I wouldn't classify it as top tier. Besides, if you do get good at the banded pull-ups and you start from like a thick band, we go all the way down to like a thin band, you're gonna be for sure building strength, which in turn builds muscle, specifically to the back muscles, right? So the lats, teres major, a bit of the upper back / rhomboids. So, and of course the biceps too, but to a lesser degree. So yeah, upper tier, man, this is non-negotiable. Y'all better agree in the comments for this one, all right? Now on the flip side, the next exercise I'm going to talk about is going to be the machine assisted pull-up. Now similar to the band assisted pull-ups, the machine attempts to mimic the pull-up movement, but I will say this though, it falls short in a couple ways. First one being, it doesn't allow you to directly engage your hips, core, and lower body the same way that the bodyweight pull-ups requires you to do so in order to perform the movement with ideal technique. And that's primarily because the machine makes you completely neglect those muscles by placing your knees on the assisted pad. But I will say this, it has more selection in terms of how to scale the exercise by simply adjusting the amount of loads that you're working with. However, that's probably the only benefit to this movement in my personal opinion. And just for that, I'm going to classify this as low tier. So in my opinion, this exercise is completely useless and you're better off doing the thick band assisted pull-ups, or if those are too difficult, stick to improving your overall strength with supplemental pull-up exercises such as inverted rows, which we'll get into in the later half of this video. But that said, let's talk about the pull-ups. Now I'm gonna include the standard pull-ups and also the weighted pull-ups as well, put them in the same category. And honestly, man, I don't feel like this needs much of a explanation, right? We all know if you do calisthenics, the pull-ups is like the #1 exercise to do for your back. So right off the bat, I'm putting this up top tier. The pull-ups is gonna directly target your back. You can train this close to or tilt failure. You can easily set this up by just having a bar or gymnastic rings. You can easily implement progressive overload by slowing down the tempo, or just my personal favorite, adding weight by doing weighted pull-ups. So it's like, it's limitless, right? And the carryover to, you know, other calisthenic movements is high. The carryover to the gym is high, and I've tested and shown that multiple times. So like I said, enough said, man. Pull-ups, top tier. Then it's going to be also the neutral grip and chin-ups. So I'm going to be separating them as different exercises, because once you specify in these 3 pull-up vertical pulling movements, they do get a little bit different in terms of like the degree of muscle activation, you know, between the back, the biceps, the brachialis, and so on. But nevertheless, I'm going to classify these as top tier as well, because it still does directly train the back, and you can train it close to failure or to failure. And it has the same progressive overload potential like the standard pull-ups, like again, weighted pull-ups, right? But I will say this, if you do want to focus on just like simply growing your back and, you know, and specialize in that, then I'll recommend sticking to the pull-ups and just going about it that way, getting to the point where you're really good at the pull-ups, increasing your weight, doing weighted pull-ups. Because the thing is with a neutral grip pull-up, it's going to target not only just the back / the lats, it's going to be specifying a little bit more on the brachialis, the part of the biceps. So that's going to give like the width of your biceps, similar to like doing hammer curls. If you're doing chin-ups or weighted chin-ups, that's going to be specifying more on the actual biceps as well as the lats. So there's like a taper in terms of like how much benefits you can get from the back, and then the benefits that you can get from other muscle groups, like, you know, like I said, the biceps or the brachii or the brachioradialis. So those are the things that the pull-ups doesn't necessarily hone in on. So if you're like me and you kind of took the route of just building your back, stick to the pull-ups, and then once you get to a point where you built a solid back, you're still training your biceps as well, you can switch over to doing neutral grip or chin-ups to just focus on building your biceps and kind of neglecting your back, since you already built that foundation. But that's just my take on it. But regardless, all 3 exercises are gonna be top tier, like no cap. Then moving on to the next exercise is gonna be the archer pull-ups. Very common pull-up variation that certainly has its cool points, and I'd say it's much more effective than the standard pull-up. However, that doesn't necessarily indicate that it's a better exercise just because it's more difficult. Now, the archer pull-ups will also target the similar muscle groups in the standard pull-up. However, the amount of force that's usually generated the most from my personal experience boils down more so on the forearm muscles, and oddly enough, my shoulders. So that said, I'm gonna give the archer pull-ups a hard, low-tier movement for, again, those reasons that I stated, because this is not great candidate for hypertrophy. It's great to build strength and to kind of like learn perhaps the one-arm pull-up. And even then, I would even say it's great for a progression exercise for the one-arm pull-up, but it does look cool, but it is difficult. I'm not gonna put this, again, as a great exercise to build muscle, and it certainly didn't build my back muscles. So I feel like most people will agree that the standard pull-ups, especially the weighted pull-ups, would triumph the archer pull-ups, but hey, that's just me though. All right, so that's pretty much all the common vertical pulling exercises that I just covered. I'm not gonna go through every single exercise because that's gonna take way too long, right? But now we're gonna switch over to the second segment, and that's gonna be the horizontal pulling movements. So this is gonna be contributing to overall width in your back by targeting more of the rhomboids, lower and mid traps, as well as your rear delts, by pulling your elbows behind your torso. Now, this doesn't mean that your lats and teres major won't be engaged like the vertical pulling movements, but it definitely depends on your hand position. That said, let's get on with the first exercise, the inverted rows. Now, this exercise is easily upper tier. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm getting ahead of myself, so let me explain why. Whether you're trying to build strength to learn to pull up or simply develop your upper back, the inverted rows is going to take all of those needs. But I'm going to dive deeper onto the ways you can progressively overload this movement to just show how underrated this exercise is. So now, the way I usually train them is with a wide hand grip position. And this is mainly because it's going to be targeting not only your upper back, like I said, the lower and mid traps, the rhomboids, but more importantly, the rear delts, right? So it's going to be the muscle on the back of your shoulders. Now, I believe that this exercise is going to help fix a lot of imbalances in guys' shoulders if they focus on training you with a wider hand placement. And you want to aim to train this movement with a horizontal or flat body positioning. Now, this will immediately shift more weight onto your torso because you're changing the leverage, forcing those upper and rear delt muscles to work that much harder. Other than that, this exercise is definitely a staple in my books, and I definitely stand by it. Now, next up is going to be the reverse ring flies. Now, I'm not gonna cap. Out of all the horizontal pulling movements on the list, and that I've trained, I'm going to put this as the top tier exercise category, mainly because of this. It definitely does a great job specifically targeting the upper back and rear delt muscles for hypertrophy, right? For building muscle. And another benefit is that it has a great stimulus to fatigue ratio, meaning you can train this movement so you can absolutely not do a single repetition without accumulating a lot of fatigue within that session that will linger on to your next pull or back day. But that's not all. Easily scalable as well in terms of manipulating the intensity. So what I like to do is usually start off with the lowest elevation that I can possibly do and say that's between 6 to 8 reps, and immediately afterwards gradually walk back and increase the elevation to reduce the intensity. But if I'm being honest, even those last few reps are going to feel like incredibly hard, like no cap. So I strongly suggest you give this exercise a try. And for that particular reason, it's great for hypertrophy. You can easily scale the movement by reducing or increasing the intensity, and that's why it's top tier, man. I definitely do attribute the reverse ring flies to development of my upper back as well as my rear delts, like no cap. So yeah, I might get some pushback on this, especially being on top of the inverted rows. But if you truly master this exercise and you have a flat or horizontal body positioning and you're doing it the correct tempo, correct technique, then I truly believe that this exercise is going to be more difficult to just perform, right, compared to the inverted rows with that similar form setup and also like that body positioning as well. Because it's just simply because you're just forcing your rear delts and upper back to work harder because they're isolated, right? Versus the inverted rows, you're pulling more so with like your biceps, right? Significantly greater than the reverse flies. And I'm not saying that you can't, do that mind muscle connection and isolate your biceps away from the equation to just focus on your upper back and rear delts. But like I said, the reverse flies is just a difficult exercise, but it's still scalable, right? So you can start as a beginner and it can still be intense enough for those who are more advanced. So that's simply the reason why I'm putting it as top tier and above the inverted rows. But like I said, I'll probably get some pushback, but it's all right. Then coming up next is going to be the front lever raises. Now this can be any variation as each of them do train the exact same muscles, but to a lesser extent depending on the progression. Now this exercise is great for not only building muscle, but strength for the front lever. And I can confidently say it is a great exercise, but I believe what is lacking is the ability to train the upper back and rear delt to a high degree. When doing any of these front lever raises specifically to your back, you're primarily using your lats to pull yourself towards the bar, which pretty much led me to realize if I want to build a thicker back, training any more of my lats wouldn't get the job done. Especially we're already focusing on one of the pull-up variations as our main vertical pull, which led me to place this movement as a low tier exercise in terms of building muscle for the back. Next up are going to be the L rows. Now this is a really cool exercise to do, and I'm not gonna lie, I did definitely do this like year 1 or year 2 of my calisthenics career, and not many people can do upside down rows, let alone right side up pull-ups, right? So that even makes sense. But let me dig a little bit deeper to this exercise. So whether you're using a pronated or supinated grip, the angle of where you're pulling yourself to the bar is mainly going to target your lats. And I even specifically would say the lower lats, because you're pulling your waist to the bar, and almost always this movement is done with the closer grip. Next up is going to be the inverted row, but with one arm, preferably on the rings, because I do like the ease of range of motion with the rings compared to the bar. So very similar to the inverted rows. The only difference here is that we're removing a limb. Now, in terms of scalability, I'd say this is a great alternative once you get past the point of doing inverted rows with both arms and you've gotten strong enough to pull your own body weight. Or you want to say perhaps fix any muscle imbalances and hyperfixate on one side, or even perhaps you just want to feel a better mind muscle connection using one arm instead of two. Now, all of these are great and valid reasons to start the inverted rows with one arm. Now, doing this movement does require some extra activation of your stabilizing muscles, which is perfect for increasing your overall body control. But I wouldn't say it'll hinder your ability to train this exercise to failure, especially if you follow the correct progressions leading up to this variant. And just because of that, I'm going to put this exercise as upper tier, right beside inverted rows, because I think personally, like the inverted rows does just a great job as the one arm inverted rows. The only difference is like the strength factor, right? It's just a difficult movement. But like I said, just because something is more difficult doesn't mean it's the best for hypertrophy, right? But this one has an exception. It's difficult, but it's easily scalable. and it's great for hypertrophy. But I don't know. There's probably like a bunch of mixed feelings about this entire category and this ranking system with pretty valid reasons. So I'm definitely interested to hear more about your opinions and thoughts about what I said and, you know, what you would do instead. And I know I definitely missed a lot of exercises, but like I said, it just would have took way too long to like create. And I kind of want to just hone in on like the exercises that I've done specifically, and also the commonly used exercise within the calisthenic niche, because I don't want to put my take on something that I don't have any kind of like experience on or relative experience about, whether I heard it from somebody or watched somebody do. So otherwise I'll just be like spouting nonsense, which a lot of people already do enough. So I'm trying to be as authentic as possible, you know, be genuine with my responses. Definitely not correct by everything, but like I said, I'm just speaking my honest truth. But hey, what do I know? If you want to see more content like this, be sure to follow me, man. I'm a Tub Fitness Scout shit, no cap.
Cobra Trains, he's up next. Make sure y'all subscribe to him. He's number one out here.
He's the toughest fitness guy out here.